Hello survivors and welcome to another Walking Dead Road to Survival video, and in this video we're going to be taking a first look at Gold Mythic Commander John, who is going to be a new character coming to RTS in the Spring Slaughter event. He's going to be part of the rewards. We're going to have to wait and see how that's going to pan out. More info on that to follow once that event is actually announced. It could be premium, it could have some free-to-play elements. We'll have to wait and see. Visually though, John looks amazing. We have had a John in the game before. He is a silver mythic who wasn't too bad for a silver mythic, honestly, but obviously the way silver mythics are, they get outscaled very heavily by limit break 3 characters. So it was always nice to see a new John come to the game, just because John is one of the kind of favorites of a lot of people. I like John a lot. Visually, he looks cool here. Looks a little bit like the silver, obviously, kind of in that like a NFL, like American football outfit. But I think visually he looks really cool. He is going to be a tough character holding that rifle, as you can see on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, he's kind of walking towards you. I'm not sure what he's got in his hand there. Is that a walk ahead or is it just like a bag? I'm not sure. I'm not so sure. We're going to check out his stats. At Limit Break 3, obviously, maxed out level 1,440. He has got 30,933 attack, 19,333 defense, and a 27,066 HP. He is going to be a tough character, of course, like we saw before. He's going to be of the support role. Of course, going to be a Gold Mythic, and he's going to be joining no other allegiance would make sense. He's going to be another member joining the Savior's Allegiance. So first off, we're going to look at Commander John's Adrenaline Rush, and it is called Biological Warfare. It has got a recharge rate of 66 AP, so it is pretty standard for an attack team. All teammates get 25% attack, 40% for Savior's Allegiance teammates instead, for each enemy with an infection status effect for 3 turns. Deals 600% damage to an enemy. So obviously, I'm going to break this down. The first part, you're going to get damage based on the amount of infection statuses on the enemy team. So if there are 2 enemies with an infection status, all teammates will get 50% attack buff. Savior's teammates will get 80%. If there are 5 enemies with an infection status, all teammates will get an 125% attack buff, whereas Savior's Allegiance teammates will get a 200% attack buff. This would always be John as a minimum, but you could include other Savior's teammates in the team and they would get that buff as well. Now, that buff would come in first, so John would get that buff first, then he'd do his 600% damage to an enemy, and this would be based off of the buffs he has included with the one he just got in this Adrenaline Rush. So he could potentially get this amplified by 40, 80% and above. So here we are attacking, and we have got the Adrenaline Rush on John right now. At the moment, there are no infection statuses on the defense team. This would mean that I would not get any attack buff when I did his Adrenaline Rush. However, I have got a character that I can just basically set up John's Adrenaline Rush very easily. I can just do the infection of Mike. There's going to be an infection on the enemy team. This means when I use the Adrenaline Rush of John on Alice at the top, you're going to see he will get a 40% attack buff. It will come in before the damage comes out on the Adrenaline Rush, but you won't really see it because the animation is really quick. You can see the 40% attack buff is on there right now, and it lasts for 3 turns. And obviously, the more infections there are, the higher attack stat that's going to do. This is dealing damage as well, so it cannot proc weapons. Something just to note. So if we look at the upgrades on the Adrenaline Rush, you can see at grade 3, it gets plus 15% attack to the buff, where it gives 25% attack overall. Initially, it's going to be 10%. Then at grade 5, it's going to get an upgrade where Savior's Allegiance teammates get 40% attack for each infection instead. And at Limit Break 2, it will get plus 300% damage. So initially, it's only going to do 300%. Then it will get boosted up to 600%. The 600% is obviously a massive boost. You can see it doing a lot of damage just, basically as it is. But when it comes to the buffs that he's going to get on top, he's going to be able to get plenty of damage, up to 200% damage boost on that 600%. So it could be, up to nearly 2,000% damage as a single hit. You're looking at a character that can basically take out, as a nuke, any character in the game if he is modded correctly against that trait. Alert characters in particular are going to be in a lot of trouble for sure. Remember, like I said, weapons do not proc, and there are certain weapons out there that reduce basic attack damage coming in. So that people who have multi-hit rushes or multi-hit signature moves can have that reduced. That's not going to work on this weapon. It's just going to be about defense. That's all that could potentially reduce the incoming damage from this realistically. So it could be worth synergizing John with some infection status characters. However, I will say it is worth noting that John actually brings some infection status to the game himself, so he may be self-sufficient in that sort of case, and you can just more think about different types of synergy when it comes to the teammates that you're going to use with John. For instance, heal reduction and infection work very well together, so that could be a pretty decent one. As a standalone, his Adrenaline Rush is nice. Obviously, it's going to hit very hard. It has massive potential for amplification, not just for himself, but for other, obviously, teammates. And it is quite a long-lasting attack buff as well. 3 turns is a long time. You can potentially get this rush off very early in the fight. You could have him have a 20% AP weapon to self. You could have him just do his signature move or a basic attack off of turn 1. And if he gets commanded by Laura, he'd be able to do this instantly. And that would be a big potential attack buff to your entire team. It really depends on the setup that you have, the amount of infections that you have out, that sort of thing. But I like this Adrenaline Rush a lot. Obviously, it has really high potential. It's just based on your setup and how you build John and how you build the team around him. Now, next up, we're going to look at John's signature move, and it is called Weaken. It has got an initial cooldown of turn 1, cooldown of 2 turns, number of uses unlimited. A line of enemies get 75% heal reduction for 2 turns if they have infection, and targets without infection get 50% infection for 2 turns instead. Deal 400% damage to that line of enemies. So breaking this down, it's pretty simple. If they have infection, they'll get 75% heal reduction, making that infection harder to remove. But if they don't have infection, they'll get infection, and it'll be a 50% infection for 2 turns instead. It's pretty simple. It's obviously going to make someone who has infection easier, to make sure that infection takes them out. But if they don't, then they're going to get infection instead, setting up basically his Adrenaline Rush for what would be potentially the next turn. The last part, where he deals 400% damage to that line of enemies, is just a bit of damage on top. Obviously, this is also not going to proc weapons. That's also worth noting, so that you want to take that into account when you build this character out. It looks like attack set is the way to go when it comes to his mods. But we'll check out how this rush works. I want to see if a character's in a line, one has infection and one doesn't. Is it based on which character you select, or is it based on the actual effects or non-effects on them at the time? So first case scenario, what we're going to do is we're just going to use the signature move against the bottom line. Pretty simple. We'll do it. We'll do 400% damage to the line, but we'll also do the 50% infection. It's because they did not have infection. If they don't have infection, they will gain infection. It's pretty much as simple as that. Now this time we're going to test it out, and you can see that we have got infection based on having a character like Michelle. We are going to do the signature move against the bottom line this time. And as you can see, they're going to get the 75% heal reduction instead of the infection. This makes it so that infection is harder to heal. But what we want to see is, if there is a character like the top line where one is infected and one is not, does it do heal reduction to Alice and then infection to Angel, or does it do it based on which character I actually select with the signature move? So we'll start the fight again just to see how that works. I'll select the character with infection. She should get heal reduction. But will Angel get infection or heal reduction? She'll get infection. So it's based on the status or non-status on the character. It isn't based on who you select. So that means that, like in this case, if there is a character with infection and a character without in the same line, they'll just get the half of the Adrenaline Rush that they are required to get. So that seems maybe a bit confusing, but I think you'll get used to it pretty quickly. As we look at the upgrades here, you can see at grade 2, it gets plus 25% to heal reduction. It is initially 50% and it goes up to 75%. At grade 4, it gets -1 to cooldown, so it goes from a 3-turn cooldown down to a 2-turn cooldown. At limit break 1, it gets -1 to starting cooldown, so it goes from a 2-turn starting cooldown down to a 1-turn starting cooldown. And at limit break 3, it gets an upgrade where a line of enemies without infection get 50% infection for 2 turns instead. So initially, it is just heal reduction on characters with infection, and then you get that secondary one come in where if they don't have infection, they get infection instead. Obviously, I think that's really nice, especially with how it's going to synergize with other things in John's kit, which you might have noticed in that last clip. Something that did occur when that actually happened. It was kind of interesting. We'll look into the rest of his kit just to see what was happening, but it's going to be very nice. It's LB3 though. It's going to be very hard to get. That's going to be 5 copies, but it does seem worthwhile if you want to get the best out of John's kit by the looks of things. I actually like this signature move quite a lot. The damage is just a nice little cherry on top. I don't necessarily think it's needed, but it just is what it is. You're going to do a bit of damage there. there. You could potentially have 2 characters in a line that are just low HP and just take them out and not really worry about the infection or heal reduction side of things. That's just basically how it can play. Now, do remember that the heal reduction and infections do come in before the damage, and this does actually make a difference because of other parts of John's kit, because other things can apply based on him applying heal reduction or infection. So he'll still get the bonuses of doing those things even if he takes those 2 characters out. Just worth noting. And to see what some of those things could be, we'll check out his mythic abilities. These are John's passive skills. He has got cunning, of course, because he is a support character. This is mainly going to affect him being attacked, and this is because when you look at his skills, his rush and his signature move, they don't actually do any attack, so it's not going to be very good for the non-proc of weapons because they don't proc weapons already. It's mainly going to be about when John actually gets directly attacked most of the time, or when he does a basic attack. The next one is called Perfect Assault. At the start of each wave, 100% chance to save your allegiance and one other teammate get 100% attack down resistance for 2 turns. This is actually pretty nice because obviously he's going to have the big attack buff that's going to come in potentially by turn 2. There are some characters out there that do attack down. For instance, you've got Rosie. If a character gets focused, she does attack down on a character. This is obviously going to stop it. This isn't going to stop attack up block though, so there is another way around this, but this is going to stop the attack down, which you generally don't want to mod against, so this is like a nice little bonus. The next passive is called Disease Protection. When an enemy receives infection, 80% chance a random teammate gets Guardian Shield. And this is what I was talking about on that signature move, where if he does apply 2 infections to that line of characters but takes them out with that signature move, it will still potentially proc Disease Protection, where 2 of your teammates will get Guardian Shields. This is actually really nice. He obviously isn't a specialist because you can see he has got a leader skill, and generally leaders can miss out on a bit of power because they're not really bringing as much to the table, but he's kind of got a little bit of Guardian Shield potential in his kit obviously, so it kind of makes him a kind of semi Guardian 2 shield at the same time as being a leader. I think this is a really nice way to compensate the fact that he does miss out on a specialist skill. I like this a lot. Guardian Shields, I think when you've got them on your attack team, are very nice to have. It stops things like dogpiling being as effective. It also stops AP gain on 1 hit, which is very, very good. And Guardian Shields, when you're on your side, I think are a good thing. Now the last passive is extremely interesting. It's called Potent Strain. When infection is cleansed from an enemy, 50% chance they get 100% infection for 2 turns. This is interesting because a lot of the infection that he's applying so far is like 50%. So if you cleanse that, and it's only from cleansing, not from healing, but if characters like Jesus 2K cleanse, it's a 50% chance he'll just reapply infection to that character with 100% infection, and that could potentially proc his Guardian Shields. It's actually pretty interesting because if you look at Disease Protection, it says when an enemy receives infection. It isn't even based on John applying it himself. It's just when they receive infection. Necessarily, it might be just from any character or any source. So the kind of combo between those last 2 in particular could be actually kind of really good for your attack team. Okay, so we have got a very strange team here on defense, and it's because it can get very chaotic trying to work out what's happening when you're actually attacking, and just being able to see what's applying what's cleansing what, that sort of thing. I'm going to do a signature move of Mike. I want to see if potentially a Guardian Shield can proc based off of other people's application of infection, and that does seem to be the case, as you can see. What we're going to do is we're going to apply infection again and get another Guardian Shield potentially. What happens if we reapply infection over the top at a higher rate? It has another chance of getting a Guardian Shield, as you can see. Now, these will be cleansed because obviously Angel self-cleanses, and so does Jesus pretty much. We'll just basically remove some stuff. There's going to be a reapplication of 100% infection there, but it didn't seem to proc the Guardian Shields. The Guardian Shield that landed on John, I think, might have come from Mike. Oh no, it didn't, because obviously Mike's would have been blocked by the Guardian Shield that's on him. So as you can see, this is how chaotic it can be. The reapplication of the 100% infection here made it actually land on John. Now, it's actually funny to note that 2-turn 100% infection, includes the turn it's implying to the character. So when it comes back to you, it's now a 1 turn. So if I just defend on all my characters, he has got 100% heal reduction on him. He can cleanse that infection, but he didn't. And that's Jesus just out. So it does potentially only last for 1 turn. On Jesus and characters like that who have a chance to self-cleanse, it isn't going to be as effective. But there are characters out there that aren't like that. So the potential with that reapply being ultra effective is really, really good. So taking a look at the upgrades on the passives, you can see the first half of Perfect Assault comes in at grade 1, where at the start of each wave, 50% chance to save your Allegiance teammates and one other character get 100% attack down resistance for 2 turns. At grade 2, he gets the first half of Cunning, where he's 15% less likely to trigger enemy weapon effects when he's being attacked or attacking. This includes walkers. And then at grade 3, he gets the second half of Perfect Assault, where it goes up to 100% chance to save your Allegiance teammates and one other teammate get 100% attack down resistance for 2 turns. At grade 4, he gets the first half of Disease Protection. When an enemy receives infection, 40% chance a random teammate gets Guardian Shield. And then at grade 5, he gets the first half of Potent Strain. When infection is cleansed from an enemy, 20% chance they get 100% infection for 2 turns instead. Then we move on to the limit breaks, and at limit break 1, he gets the second half of Cunning, where he's going to have 30% total, less chance to be able to trigger enemy weapon effects and walker effects. At limit break 2, he gets the second half of Disease Protection, where it's an 80% chance a random teammate gets Guardian Shield. And then at limit break 3, he's going to get the second half of Potent Strain, where it's going to go up to 50% chance that they get 100% infection for 2 turns when an infection is cleansed off of any character. It will reapply to the character it's cleansed off of, but as you saw, it can potentially proc the Guardian Shields, and the way the 2 turns works, it includes that turn that was actually applied to the enemy. So effectively, it's like 1 extra turn. This is obviously really powerful if it procs. It's going to speed up fights quite a lot, especially if you're building an infection-based team. Autoing seems to be very prominent with Commander John in your team, just based off of his passives, just based off of his signature move. I really like his passives. I like that the last 2, Disease Protection and Potent Strain, work together so well. Guardian Shields, I hate them when I'm attacking against them, but when they're on my side, I love them. So if you've got Guardian Shields on your team and they're going to be proccing non-stop, the reason I had to use a 2-character defense there is because I did use a 4-character defense. I couldn't work out what was going on. There was Guardian Shields popping up, disappearing because they were getting attacked. It was really hard to really kind of work out, but just know when a Guardian Shield procs, it would obviously have a chance to block attacks, and then if that attack was applying control at the same time, it also blocked the control. So Guardian Shields are just great. So yep, thumbs up on these passives. Work really well for John. Enhance his kit, particularly that signature move. And obviously he's going to have a chance of reapplying infection if they are cleansed off of turn 1 signature move, so that he has a chance to still have infection on the enemy team when he gets the time to do his Adrenaline Rush. The buff's going to come in. It looks pretty decent there. Now last but by no means least, on his main kit, we're going to look at John's leader skill, and it is going to be a pretty interesting one indeed. All teammates get 40% attack. At the start of each wave, 3 random enemies get 100% infection for 3 turns. I will say this has a chance to proc those Guardian Shields, so you can get those Guardian Shields very nice and early. Obviously, depending on where these infections land, you can decide where you want to go with the signature move. You could do heal reduction to the enemies that get infection, or try and infect enemies that didn't get initially off of that leader skill. There can potentially be 5 enemies infected off of turn 1, and that means that when he gets his rush chance, that application of the ×5 buff, 125% attack for non-Saviors members, 200% attack for Saviors members, is actually quite high. So yeah, the potential here is really, really nice. It's going to be really fun in terms of how John's kit works. Theoretically, those 3-turn infections could get cleansed off of turn 1 to be made a 1-turn infection straight away. So it can actually effectively buff the infection that's already down from his leader skill. Yeah, I think John's going to be a lot of fun, honestly. Now, John obviously has no attached weapon. He has got a default weapon in his hands. You can put whatever weapon you want. You could put the Impair weapon on attack in his hands. Remember, he can't proc when he attacks, so you might want to go for weapon on defense. So if he does get targeted, he's potentially impairing the enemy. You could go for 20% AP to self, like I said before. If you team him up with Laura, then obviously he can rush very early. If you get 5 infections down off of turn 1 and then rush with him, you're buffing his rush, that initial rush, by 200%, but then you're also buffing all the teammates by whatever percentage based on their allegiance. Then you could do their signature moves off of turn 1. This could be really good. Maybe his synergy with someone like Rosita could be good because of the heal reduction she does can stop the infection being removed that he applies. Obviously stacks up negative status effects, so if there is a character that has a 1 status effect cleanse, it might not actually hit the infection, giving more chance that the infection is actually going to last long enough to take out a character. There are definitely some synergy characters out there with John. I can see Laura, John and Rosita in the same team quite often. The other 2 character slots, well, let me hear your ideas on those guys. Let me know in the comments. So that's just a little first look at Commander John, who is, like I said, going to be coming to the game as part of an event called the Spring Slaughter. We'll have to wait for more details on how that event's going to work, but John himself, just visually alone, looks really cool. He could even potentially work on defense because I didn't see too many of those things saying on an offense team. A lot of it was just application of infection. So potentially you could have him on a defense team and applying infection really early on in the fight. Guardian shields going around your team. If you make the rest of the team quite defensive, those initial infections could be just really problematic to deal with. He will have to be the leader to make it more effective, so a lot of the time you will know it's happening, but obviously the way the war teams work right now is you know what's on a war team, so it's not as problematic as it was once upon a time. But I like John a lot. I hope I can get my hands on him. We'll have to wait and see. Let me know your thoughts on John in the comments down below. That is the end of my video. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. And as always, keep on surviving, guys. Keep on surviving.